On April 2nd, 2025, Trump declared a state of emergency in America. There are many more emergency laws in the United States than emergency laws. The law he declared is called the International Economic Powers Emergency Act. Powers Act. This law is, when we hear the word emergency in general, the various emergency laws. It expresses major crises going through a country. The president declares a state of emergency. This declaration can impose certain laws or take certain decisions that violate the usual laws in the state and go beyond the House of Representatives, and thus also escape popular oversight through the House of Representatives or the judiciary through the courts. It is clear that if he does not use this law well, it will lead to an absolute dictatorship of rule. President Bevered Bay, the decisions are specific, and there is no review by the House of Representatives, and there is no judicial prosecution as a result of this decision. What did he do? Trump on April 2nd, 2025, when he declared a national economic emergency on this subject, he is using a specific emergency law, which was in effect in America in the year 977 in the time of Jimmy Carter. Under this law, the president is entitled to confiscate property and impose penalties. He does things contrary to the usual American laws, especially economic matters. This is because he feels there is a threat to national security from outside the country. This law, when it was implemented until now, has a period of 1 year and will be renewed automatically if Congress does not reject it, but it has a year before they think about it. I mean, they repeal this law that he issued, which is a state of emergency in the country. Congress. He tried a lot to make the year a month in order to limit the absolute powers of the president, but he failed over the various years from the year 77 until now. It has a duration of 1 year and is renewable. Of course, when Trump announced this, he announced it, declare, why should I do an emergency? Because we have a record deficit in 2024, a deficit of $1.2 trillion. The deficit, the difference between imports and exports in the country, has reached very high limits in America. He said, I will do this to save the country from a record trade deficit, which has never been the largest number before. America's road ID is this number. Of course, in order for the issue to proceed and not to be subjected to popular media or political persecution from the Democratic Party or something like that, some enthusiastic words announce that this is, for example, Liberation Day, or to an expressive extent. It was declared Independence Day. I mean, things like this are so huge that the day is the birth of American industry again. This declaration enabled him to impose excessive customs duties on all countries of the world. Some countries have about 60 or more. These customs duties are exaggerated in very large numbers, and of course this will lead to complex economic problems. It will have some repercussions, the effects of which may not appear until years later, and it may lead to economic collapse. This applies globally, whether in America or other countries. Map of allies and opponents. People who were your friends will remain your enemies, and vice versa, meaning he is doing something that is contrary to the natural approach in which the state is walking. CNN, if it is saying that Trump already has a passion for this law, the emergency law, it gives him broad powers to impose tariffs outside of what Congress says without providing reasonable justifications because it is in a state of emergency. By the way, I'm talking about this law before it is enacted. 1/8/2025 AD, and it is fair on January 20th, meaning before me he was prepared for this topic, but it was announced, as we said, on April 2nd. Legal experts in America say that the law is only used in acute cases, and he has used it now, and he said it has a record deficit in SAA. In America, this disability does not affect anyone or anything. This disability remains for him. The first instance of this deficit was in 1976. We are talking about 50 years, approximately 50 years of disability, so there is no state of emergency, but he did this. Congress can object to the president's speech declaring a state of emergency, but Congress's objection must be 2-3. It is not useful to object with a simple majority. It is not useful to object with 51% of Congress to object. No, they must say they answer the 3. And practically impossible, they answer that number. Now it is impossible for them to object because all Republicans will vote for Trump in Congress. Now it is text and a half, so it will not be useful if they object to this law. Trump's declaration of a state of emergency with the aim of approving something that Congress is not satisfied with is a circumvention of democracy. I mean, it is an escape from judicial prosecution. This is something that is not strong in the American approach, but it has come to mean periodically that we see Trump's state in it, whether it is the state of dead or the state of the previous one, and the judiciary itself does not move very much in following the president in the decisions he takes during the state of emergency. Why? Because they say it's an emergency, especially with regard to national security, and the judiciary does not interfere much in issues related to national security. It leaves the matter to me, the strange presidency. Glory be to God, this Law 77, which was in effect in the days of Jimmy Carter, was intended to limit the powers of the president. Not that it is my hand. He has absolute powers like this, because the law before it was in force in 1917. The law was old and gave the president completely absolute powers without a period. It's not like this, for example, what's wrong with a year? There is a certain extent in the procedures. It has nothing to do with external threats. External and internal threats are not possible. I mean, there is nothing you are attacking. A similar example of American law in a similar situation was absolute in this way. So they enacted the Law of 77 in order to reduce the powers of the Law of 17, but apparently it's him. If I misuse it, she'll clear the whole thing. Outside the framework of congressional approval or people's approval of decisions, what President Trump takes is getting used to the issue of imposing a state of emergency. This is an approach to politics that expresses a specific behavior. I mean, for example, he used this international law in his first term in 2017, to punish several international figures. Also, Congress did not approve this issue, but it was a state of emergency act, and he came to impose sanctions on a number of presidents and generals of the world. On September 10th, 2000, an individual's approval was also used to impose sanctions. And people have used hacking in, as Trump says, means changing the state of the world. The election, and many of them were from Russia, where in 2018 I also used the emergency law to impose sanctions on the Nicaraguan regime. Also, using the Nicaraguan regime, what Trump says means random violence could have been returned to the judiciary and returned to L for Congress. The issue remains raised naturally, or all of this goes out with the emergency law, and I issue my own decisions. Also, he submitted a request to build a wall between America and Mexico, and he asked for a grant from Congress $710,000 to build this wall, but Congress refused. So he used the emergency law, built the wall, or started building the wall. He wanted to use this law for energy, meaning anything, but something very strange, meaning for energy. He wanted to drill and run on oil. He wants to use coal despite Congress's rejection, so the Emergency Energy Act is invoked. He began to focus on oil and other than coal, leaving it as a metal. Coal is originally a chemical, not a metal, but he entered it so that they could enter the factories under the laws, and it is estimated that he extracted it in small quantities and used it in industry. The border emergency law was enacted, and thus the army was deployed in the northern border with Canada, the southern border with Mexico, and this is also in violation of the decisions of Congress. He left. The emergency law is specific to immigration, to deport immigrants in certain ways that are not approved by Congress nor by American law. Something very, very strange. I mean, if I were to limit this issue to the point of making a flying law for timber. Ha 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 ha. He wants to cut wood in America from the forest, and the laws prevent him. Environmental laws prevent him from doing this, and he wants to import wood in order to reduce its price, because it needs to be imported from Canada in large quantities. I used the emergency law and opened the way to open 112,000 acres of timber for the forest to cut these forests. It may be the right decision, but it must be passed through Congress. The emergency law continues to leave him with nothing he is hostile to outside. Congress remains entirely from the brain of the president who issued this decision. This all boils down to one concept, which is the desire to be exclusive in opinion, imitating the models that Trump once said he was fascinated by. With it, the model doctor the president, the dictator who is able to make decisions without looking at what the House of Representatives, the People's Assembly, the people in general, or the judiciary says. Putin in Russia is like the president of China, like the president of North Korea. He has previously declared that the number of models means dazzling in my life. He is a model of what the Lord of the worlds, glory be to him, said in the story of Pharaoh. Pharaoh said, I will only show you what I see, and I will only guide you to the path of guidance. The American citizen will suffer from high prices as a result of this. The duties imposed on foreign goods. Of course, he suspended the issue for 90 days, but the issue in the end is that after negotiations with some countries, it is possible to reduce the wholesale duties a little like this. But in the end, the wholesale customs duties will make the American citizens suffer from current prices. As we said, the map of allies and opponents will change. Some countries that are considered traditional allies of America, such as the European Union and Canada, may no longer be allies of America. That is, new enemies will appear through the list, which is the labor of America from different countries and different economic blocs in Asia or in other countries of the world against America. All this will happen. The result of this decision. The major relationship will look for markets other than the American market and for investments other than investing with America. All of this can undermine the foundations of a state whose founders tried as much as they could if they had university opinions, which had a kind of democracy and which had the opinion of all existing states, but they are walking on a different path now as a result of these decisions. The authoritarianism that Trump and his administration are carrying out may be a prelude to something very big, and the world must be ready for all possibilities. May God's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.